Hey guys, welcome back. Tonight we're going to take things slow as we drift through the quiet side of American history. No battles blasting in your ears, no political drama keeping you up. Just a calm, continuous story, unfolding like a soft quilt of time. From the first footprints on this land to the rise of cities and satellites, we'll move gently, one sleepy step at a time. Whether you're winding down from your day or already tucked in bed, this is your invitation to relax, breathe deep, and let the past carry you peacefully toward sleep. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it right now? Now dim the lights and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Picture the continent as it was before roads, flags or borders, a patchwork of forests, plains, coastlines and mountain ranges, soft rain falling through old-growth pines, rivers winding through canyons and tall grass. You're standing in what will one day be called America, but right now it's a land of many nations, and none of them are English. You hear the steady tap of a stone tool. In a quiet woodland clearing, someone's crafting a fishing hook. Farther off, cornfields sway beside dome-shaped homes, and smoke rises gently from the center of a longhouse. There are hundreds, thousands of cultures here. Some mobile, following herds, others settled in towns with their own laws, calendars, and systems of trade. And yes, some even had cities larger than European capitals at the time. Cahokia, for instance, remember that name? It's not as famous as Rome or Athens, but at its peak, it had a population rivaling 12th century London. Mounds rose up from the Mississippi basin like soft hills with purpose, built by hand with earth and time. Historians still argue whether Cahokia functioned as a sacred center, a political hub, or something more complex. But we know it mattered deeply to the people who built it. Farther west, great pueblos clung to canyon walls in what's now the American Southwest. You walk through sandstone chambers, cool in the shadow, warm in the sun, and sense the rhythm of daily life. Ceramic stacked neatly in corners, dried maize in woven baskets, echoes of quiet laughter. The eastern woodlands are dense with life and meaning. Here, nations like the Haudenosaunee, later called the Iroquois Confederacy, govern themselves through councils, debates, and long memory. You picture a fire circle at dusk, the soft voices of elders balancing peace and politics with equal weight. Trade moves not by ocean, but by trail and river. You follow the path of copper from Lake Superior, shell beads from the coast, obsidian from the Rockies, all passed from hand to hand long before a single European anchor touched shore. And it's peaceful in a way that modern timelines often skip. This wasn't an empty wilderness waiting to be claimed. It was full of people, language, ceremony, astronomy, music, agriculture, and belief. Then, slowly at first, ships begin to appear on the edge of memory. White sails on distant horizons. Wood creaking, boots landing, maps unrolling. You feel the shift. You step away from the last echo of a canoe paddle and watch as a new rhythm arrives on the wind. Foreign words, iron tools, and ideas of land that don't quite match what's already here. You stay still, watching as the sails drift closer. The air is thick with uncertainty. It's the early 1600s, and European ships begin appearing with more regularity, mostly English, Spanish, Dutch, and French. Each group brings its own ambitions, its own definitions of land, trade, and belonging, and none of them seem entirely sure what they've found. You walk ashore at Jamestown. It's muddy, humid, and mosquito-heavy. The settlers don't look too thrilled about it either. They're cold, wet, and vaguely confused. Many are gentlemen, unused to hard labor. Their dreams of instant gold turn quickly into sore backs and fishy rations. The surrounding Powhatan people observe them cautiously, likely wondering how these newcomers intend to survive with such poor footwear and questionable farming skills. Meanwhile, up in New England, the Pilgrims arrive on the Mayflower and plant their hopes, along with their boots, into frozen soil. The air is cleaner here, sharper, but the land is unfamiliar, and by the end of the first winter, nearly half of them are gone. Still, they hold on. Building, bury, rebuild. At first, colonies are thin strips along the coast, fragile and hungry. Life depends on adaptation, learning which crops will grow, what animals to trap, and whether the neighbors want to trade or avoid you entirely. It's not a neat process. In fact, it's rather patchy, with some settlements thriving and others vanishing like smoke. You step into one of the more successful towns, maybe Boston or Williamsburg. The buildings are simple but sturdy, timber frames, thatched roofs, smoky fireplaces. Children carry buckets, cows wander. The smell of bread and damp wool fills the air. People speak in the rhythms of home, though home is now an ocean away. Still, it doesn't take long for questions to arise. Who governs this place? Who makes the rules? England is far, and letters take months. And so, local assemblies begin to form. Town halls, councils, charters. The early seeds of American governance are planted quietly, with more practicality than revolution. But beneath the surface, deeper complexities churn. European diseases spread like whispers through indigenous communities who never saw them coming. Land agreements shift, break, and reform. There's no single timeline here, just overlapping stories, often moving in different directions at once. And here's something curious. In the early days, some colonies weren't just English. The Dutch held New Amsterdam. The Swedes settled parts of Delaware. The Spanish, of course, moved through the south and west. You wander through a quiet Dutch street, narrow and cobbled, with pointed roofs and tidy gardens. A rooster crows. A merchant haggles over beaver pelts. It's not the American story you're used to hearing, but it's part of it. Historians still argue whether the colonies were destined for unity or always meant to drift apart. Some say shared grievances would have pulled them together no matter what. Others think luck and geography played just as large a role, but at this stage there's no talk of independence, just survival. A good harvest, a sturdy roof before winter. By now you've walked from Jamestown to Massachusetts, wandered past fishing villages, Dutch windmills and fur trading posts, and you're starting to feel the rhythm. Chop wood, plant crops, patch roofs, argue over local taxes, rest on Sundays and repeat. You linger near a small chapel as dusk settles over the colony. A bell rings softly. Candlelight flickers in the windows. Someone hums a psalm while stirring stew. The air smells of wood smoke and sage. It's not glamorous, but it's real. Lived, earned. And just as things begin to feel a little stable, you hear it again. That distant ripple in the timeline. A murmur of tariffs, a ship unloading crates of taxed tea, a pamphlet passed from hand to hand, ink still fresh and biting. The people who once begged for a place in this new world are beginning to question the cost of keeping it. You step away from the village square and head toward the next chapter of this quiet march through American time. The road ahead is dusty, lined with wheat, and just a little louder than before. The dusty road ahead winds past tobacco fields and timber mills, through colonies that are no longer just outposts, but something more permanent. Towns have grown, families span generations, and local newspapers rattle in the breeze on porch rails. You pass a quiet port, Charleston maybe. Ships creak gently in the water, unloading barrels of molasses, crates of cloth, and an uncomfortable amount of paperwork from London. The colonies are productive and profitable, but increasingly irritated. You overhear a few voices in a tavern, soft at first, discussions about taxes, about distant decisions made by people who've never set foot on this soil. The Stamp Act, the Townshend Act, the Sugar Act. It's hard to keep track. The names change, but the feeling stays the same. Tightening control, growing resentment. A man mutters into his ale about representation. A woman behind the counter nods quietly, wiping glasses that never quite seem clean. Even the more loyal subjects of the crown are growing tired. They came here for opportunity, for space, not to be squeezed from across an ocean. The colonies don't exactly agree with each other on everything. They still argue over borders and trade, over religion and rice. But they're beginning to share one thing, a slow-burning frustration. You step into a print shop. It smells of ink and scorched paper. Flyers hang from strings, pamphlets stacked like kindling. One of them catches your eye, sharp words from a man named Thomas. He's not shouting, but the tone is clear. Time to think differently. Outside, the world doesn't feel revolutionary. It still moves with the same daily rhythm. Hooves clop on cobblestones, bread bakes, children chase chickens. But the mood is shifting. You can feel it in how people linger in doorways, how they pause before speaking their mind. Even silence feels heavier than it did a decade ago. And here's a fringe detail. Tea drinking, once a cherished custom, becomes something of a political statement. Some patriots start switching to coffee not for taste, but for defiance. You sip a cup of weak brew and nod. It's not delicious, but it makes a point. Historians still argue whether the revolution was inevitable or a series of unfortunate missteps on both sides. Could better communication have changed things? Could more flexibility have softened the divide? Maybe. But at a certain point, ideas take on a life of their own. As you stroll into Boston, the tension grows denser. There are redcoats stationed at street corners, their uniforms too bright against the muddy roads. People avoid eye contact. You watch a group of boys toss snowballs toward a soldier. Laughter, a shove, then a shot. And suddenly, things aren't so quiet anymore. But even rebellion takes time to build. You follow the trail of committees, secret meetings, letters penned by candlelight. Paul Revere's famous ride was just one part of a much wider web. Messages carried by riders, whispered in churches, passed between market stalls. Communication becomes the backbone of discontent. You step into a small farmhouse where a family reads a declaration by the fire. The words are bold, stirring. Life, liberty, the pursuit of something better. You don't hear cheering, just a long, thoughtful silence. Choosing sides isn't easy. Not everyone is convinced, not everyone wants a war. Yet the choice is being made, slowly, day by day. A new identity is forming, not as Virginians or New Yorkers or Pennsylvanians, but as something bigger, Americans. It's still a fragile word, a hope, not yet a fact. The field outside is still green, the cows still wander, but in a matter of months, that same field might hold soldiers instead, or redcoats, or nothing at all. The grumbling has grown into something more, something that will demand more than words. You can already hear the faint echo of drums, the shuffle of marching feet. It's not loud yet, but it's coming. You turn toward it, stepping quietly into the dawn of revolution. You follow the faint drum beats east until they begin to sharpen. Soft footsteps replaced by boots in formation, quiet tavern talk replaced by hurried whispers and musket clicks. The American Revolution isn't one loud, glorious roar. It's a slow, staggering rhythm, muddy, uncertain, and deeply human. You arrive in 1775, just as the first shots are fired at Lexington and Concord. No epic soundtrack, no sweeping camera angles, just early morning fog, cracked gunstocks, and startled militiamen trying to figure out what exactly they've done. The war has begun, but few realize how long it will last, or how winding the road will be. You walk beside farmers turned soldiers, their clothes threadbare, their boots inconsistent at best. Some wear the wrong size, some don't have boots at all. The British, by contrast, march in coordinated lines, red coats sharp against the countryside. But even they begin to struggle in the vast wilderness, where roads vanish into mud and loyalties shift like riverbanks. The war isn't constant noise, most of it is waiting, marching, writing letters home, if there's any paper. You sit beside a campfire with a group of soldiers eating hardtack and cold beans, their breath clouding in the air. One hums an old folk tune, another counts stars. There's more boredom than glory, more blisters than bravado. In the cities, life continues in strange parallel. Blacksmiths still hammer iron, shopkeepers tally goods, and newspapers flutter with rumors. Some citizens support the cause. Others remain loyal to the crown. Most just want things to settle. You step into Independence Hall as a few dozen men gather to sign a document they know could cost them everything. The air is hot. The room smells of sweat, old ink and powdered wigs. The words are familiar now, even soothing, but at the time they tremble with risk. Outside, not everyone cheers. Some scoff, some frown. The idea of independence feels abstract when your grain shipment hasn't arrived and your neighbor's barn just burned down. And here's your quirky detail. George Washington, stoic leader, military icon, once had to beg for new uniforms and write letters reminding Congress that his men couldn't fight with invisible ammunition. He was respected, yes, but also frustrated. The war was underfunded and poorly supplied. The miracle wasn't that the revolution succeeded, it's that it didn't completely fall apart by 1777. Historians still argue whether American victory was due to strategy, timing, French support, or sheer stubbornness. Most likely, it was all of the above. The tide begins to shift at Saratoga, then again at Yorktown. But even after surrender, nothing feels settled. No one really knows what free country means yet. You walk through a town square where the war is over, but scars remain. A wooden sign swings in the breeze. A house has its roof patched with mismatched shingles. Life resumes slowly, warily. And the question becomes, now what? There's no blueprint for how to build a country from scratch. The colonies are loosely tied by war, but now they must figure out how to govern peace. The Articles of Confederation are drafted, then fumbled. States argue, farmers rebel. The Union, just barely born, already threatens to split. Yet, amid the noise, hope flickers. You pass a quiet tavern where delegates meet in secret. Their goal? A stronger structure, something more durable. They call it a constitution. It's not perfect. It sparks heated debate, but eventually it sticks. You sit in a chair beside the window as they sign it. There's no parade, no fireworks, just relieved exhaustion and the scratch of quills. The Republic has taken form, delicate, new, sleepy even, but real. Outside, a new flag hangs from a post, 13 stars, a symbol not of triumph, but of beginning. The soldiers have gone home. The ink has dried. The tea has cooled. And now, slowly, the nation begins to walk forward. You walk with the young nation now, its footsteps unsure but persistent. The revolution has ended, the Constitution is signed, and the United States, still fragile, still incomplete, has begun its next great experiment, governing itself. There's no loud celebration, no grand switch from struggle to serenity. Instead, you find quiet meetings, mail routes expanding, and the steady scratch of local scribes writing new laws in candlelit rooms. Out on the frontier, the mood is different. You pass families in creaking wagons rolling over uneven paths, the wheels groaning with every dip and stone. Behind them, towns they've left. Ahead, vast stretches of land both promising and perilous. The word West has started to carry magic in it, a restless lure. From Appalachian foothills to distant rivers, people move, some with land grants, some without, some with dreams bigger than their maps. Back in the cities, debates continue. How strong should the central government be? What does liberty mean for the people who were left out of its definition? You sit in a crowded room as Federalists and Anti-Federalists argue with tired eyes and dry throats, convinced they're building something permanent, even if they disagree on how. The first presidents take office, each one trying to shape an office no one has ever truly held before. You watch Washington ride through muddy streets, quiet and deliberate, his every move setting precedent. Then Adams, then Jefferson, each adding their layer to the structure, some stable, some splintered. And while the political class argues and writes and signs, the people keep moving. You pass a young teacher in a one-room schoolhouse, chalking letters onto a rough plank board. Her students squirm on benches made of split logs. Outside, the wind whistles through cracked shutters. She reads aloud from a worn primer, her voice soft, steady, unshaken. These are the builders of the new country too, not with documents, but with daily repetition. In the south, tobacco plantations grow larger. Cotton begins to rise, but so does something darker. You pass a row of enslaved people working in silence, the sun baking down, the ground hard and unyielding. The contradiction sits heavy in the air. Freedom, so loudly claimed, still withheld from millions. Historians still argue whether the founders truly believed slavery would fade over time, or whether they chose not to imagine the cost of removing it. Some say they planted the seeds of its destruction. Others say they buried the truth in compromise. You move farther west now, where the soil is new, and the towns still smell like sawdust. States are being added, slowly, like brushstrokes on a giant canvas. But not everyone agrees where the canvas ends, or who it belongs to. You pass a group of indigenous people, recently forced from their land, carrying bundles, children, memory. The frontier is growing, but it grows by taking. The stories you hear here are quieter, often whispered in languages the government refuses to recognize. Still, the country continues, with every new town, every barn raising, every county fair, and church meeting and country road, the nation becomes more real. And here's your quirky fact for the night. During Thomas Jefferson's presidency, the US acquired the Louisiana Territory, doubling its size overnight. Jefferson, a lover of small government and strict interpretations, essentially violated his own principles to make the purchase. But in doing so, he opened a door so wide that America would spend the next century walking through it. You find yourself at the Mississippi River now, standing on a muddy bank as the water moves slowly, almost lazily, past your feet. Steamboats chuff in the distance, traders shout over crates, there's music on the breeze, maybe a fiddle, maybe just the creaking of rope against wood. This is where East meets West, where old ideas start to feel stretched and new ones begin to form. Expansion is no longer a theory, it's a national habit. There's a pull now, stronger than ever, and as the river winds forward, so does the country. Toward more invention, more contradiction, and more quiet moments of decision no one notices at the time. You follow the water a little longer, the sky is wide, the future is uncertain, and America, still young, keeps walking. The Mississippi fades behind you, but its rhythm follows you, slow, persistent, steady. The young nation is no longer toddling. It's moving with intent now, even if it occasionally stumbles. You head westward, where wagons etch faint trails into tall grass prairies and families chase rumors of rich soil and open sky. The country is expanding rapidly, too rapidly for its own peace. New states are added, populations shift, and with every mile claimed, questions deepen. Who controls this land? Who deserves to call it home? What rules will follow the people who plant roots here? You pass a farmhouse in Ohio. A boy is repairing a fence while his mother churns butter, pausing to watch a neighbor ride past with news from Washington. The man dismounts, shares a letter, then rides off again. Information still travels slowly. Decisions made far away take days, weeks, sometimes months to ripple outward. And by the time they arrive, the locals have already adapted, solved, or ignored the issue themselves. Inside the house, the family gathers by lamplight. On the table, a newspaper page warns of rising tensions between northern and southern states, something about tariffs, something about state rights. It's unclear. The boy just knows that whenever those headlines show up, his father sighs a little louder than usual. You wander down into Georgia, then back up to Illinois. Slavery isn't just a southern issue anymore. It's seeping into every political conversation, every legal case, every church sermon. In some places it's defended fiercely, in others denounced with growing volume. Lines are being drawn, not yet battle lines, but something close. You hear the speeches, some bold, some measured, some shouted from wooden stages. You sit in the back row, unnoticed, as a young lawyer named Lincoln speaks in a clear, high voice about unity and conscience. The crowd is quiet, thoughtful, torn. And here's your fringe detail. In the 1840s and 50s, mail-order sermons and political pamphlets were passed from hand to hand like treasured books. Many people only heard the great debates second-hand through the interpretations of trusted neighbors or itinerant preachers. The idea of news was often communal, shaped in part by who read it aloud. As you move along dusty roads toward Kansas, the mood thickens. Bleeding Kansas, they'll call it one day, but for now, it's just tension in the air. Neighbors stop greeting one another, churches split. The same soil that promises harvest now tastes faintly of gunpowder. Then Fort Sumter, April 1861. A cannon fires at dawn. You don't hear the blast so much as feel the echo. It rolls through the hills, bounces off brick alleys and quiet farms, and lands with a heavy thud in every American home. The Union has fractured. The Civil War has begun. You step into a soldier's tent near Manassas. He's writing home by lantern light, his pen scratchy and uneven. He describes the mud, the long waits, the aching boots. Not much glory here, just fear and rain and rations that never seem to come on time. You walk through battlefields that are somehow both chaotic and silent, empty of movement now, but still heavy with what happened. A discarded bayonet, a tattered coat sleeve, a letter never sent. And even in wartime, life continues in the background. A woman in Pennsylvania brews coffee over a fire, while children chase chickens between clotheslines. In Georgia, a man rebuilds a barn for the third time. The war is everywhere, but also not. It slides between cracks, touching every life differently. Historians still argue whether the Civil War was about slavery, economics, state sovereignty, or all three braided tightly together. But to the people living through it, the reasons are less abstract. It's about survival, about grief, about wondering whether your brother will come home next spring. You follow the long arc of the war all the way to Appomattox. The surrender is quiet, simple, no triumphant parade. Just two generals meeting in a farmhouse parlor, exchanging words, signatures, and silence. You step outside into the pale April sun, the smell of paper and dust lingering in the air. It's over. But it isn't. Because healing takes longer than war. And as you walk into the years that follow, the roads are cracked but still open. The country is whole again, but only on the map. The war is over, but nothing feels settled. You step cautiously into the years known as Reconstruction, though Reconstruction suggests something tidy, planned, linear. What you find is far more uneven. Some places rebuild, others burn again. The physical scars are visible, flattened towns, graveyards with too many fresh markers. But the emotional wounds are deeper, harder to map. You walk down a dusty street in Richmond. The buildings still stand mostly, but windows are shattered, and signs hang crooked. A freedman's school operates from the shell of an old church. Children sit on crates, scratching letters into slates, while outside adults try to learn how to live free in a country still unsure what freedom truly means. You move farther south. The plantations look different now, some abandoned, some operating under sharecropping, which promises a new system, but often feels like a reshuffled version of the old one. You see a man counting seed, his hands cracked from years of labor. He owns his hours now, but not his land. Not yet. In Washington, politicians argue constitutional amendments pass, big ones, bold ones, giving citizenship, voting rights, legal protections. On paper, the country is transformed, but the ink dries faster than minds change. You listen as black leaders speak to crowded churches, hopeful yet measured. You also hear the quiet resistance forming around them, laws rewritten to sound neutral, but cut sharp beneath the surface. Poll taxes, literacy tests, loopholes. It's reconstruction, yes, but also retrenchment. And here's a detail tucked into the margins of this era. Entire black towns begin to form across the South and Midwest. Places like Nicodemus, Kansas, founded by freed people seeking new beginnings in wide open spaces. You walk its single main street at sunset, wind brushing the prairie, a faint hymn rising from a clapboard church. It's small, quiet, and defiantly hopeful. But not all change is southern. You wander northward into cities swelling with new industries, steel, rail, textiles. The pace of life quickens, smokestacks rise. You hear the hiss of steam, the clatter of machines. Immigrants pour into these cities from Ireland, Germany, Italy, and later from China and Eastern Europe. They bring languages, traditions, and the muscle that powers factories and lays track. You stand on a street corner in Chicago. The air smells of coal and fresh bread. Streetcars rattle past. A newspaper boy yells headlines you can barely hear over the clang of a blacksmith's hammer. This isn't just a country recovering, it's reinventing itself. And yet with every step forward, friction follows. Workers strike, women organize. Debates rage over labor hours, education, temperance, suffrage. The country is moving, yes, but not always in agreement. You visit a tenement in New York. It's cramped, hot. The stairs creak like they might give out. But there's a sewing machine by the window and a boy doing his homework on the floor while his mother prepares dinner over a coal stove. The hope here isn't loud. It's not painted on banners. It's in repetition, in routine, in staying. Historians still argue whether Reconstruction failed or was deliberately dismantled, whether the industrial age lifted more than it crushed. But as you walk these streets, stand in these schools, peer into these homes, you don't see tidy answers, just lives, in motion, holding on. You step out of the city and follow a railroad west. The trains don't run on time, not yet, but they run. They connect people who once might have lived entire lives a few counties apart, never meeting. Now they write letters, they visit, they trade. And the government keeps growing, slowly, bureau by bureau. The census expands. The postal service stretches to the furthest corners of Montana and Arizona. You pass a tiny post office lit by lantern light, a stack of mailbags against the wall, and a clerk with ink-stained hands, sorting it all by memory. The flag now has more stars. The maps are fuller. And still, questions echo. What does unity really look like? What does it cost? You don't have the answers, but you keep walking, because the road continues upward, outward, forward. You continue westward, along trails first carved by animals, then widened by wagon wheels, then overtaken by railroads. The horizon stretches open in every direction, a sky so vast it swallows noise. This is the age of expansion, territories turning into states, towns springing up around water pumps, telegraph poles marching across dry plains, like a line of punctuation marks trying to keep up with history. It's not the wild, lawless frontier of tall tales and dime novels. It's quieter, grimmer. You pass a sod house dug halfway into the earth, where a family of 5 lives with more dust than furniture. Their calendar hangs by a bent nail, days crossed off with fading pencil marks. The wind here doesn't stop. It pulls at the roof, whispers through cracks, keeps them alert even in sleep. The Homestead Act has opened up land to those willing to work it, but free land is never truly free. You watch a man spend half a morning coaxing a well to life. His wife kneads bread in silence. Their children race barefoot between fence posts, chasing grasshoppers because toys are rare and store-bought anything is hours away by wagon. You pass dozens of such homes, some thriving, some abandoned, some still half-built, leaning stubbornly into the prairie wind. You travel with them in spirit, those seeking new starts. Freedmen from the south, immigrants, young couples with only a mule and a cracked map. Their dreams vary, but their struggle looks familiar. Water, shelter, survival. But the land wasn't empty. You move through territories where indigenous nations still live, still hunt, still remember the shape of the rivers before the new fences arrived. Some resist, some negotiate. Most are forced into smaller and smaller spaces, reservations where traditions are squeezed by policy and patience. You visit one such camp in the Dakotas. A winter wind slices through your coat. A grandmother braids her granddaughter's hair beside a fire built of buffalo bones and driftwood. The stories haven't stopped, but they're told more quietly now. Historians still argue whether the US government believed its expansion was manifest destiny or calculated displacement. Probably both. The language of destiny makes it easier to justify erasure. The tracks of the railroad laid over ancient trails carry more than freight. They carry new rules, new maps, and new silence. And still the movement west continues. Gold is discovered in California, then silver. You pass through mining camps that smell of sulfur and sweat. Men sleep in tents and dream of strikes. Some make fortunes, most don't. The American West is full of opportunity, but also cave-ins, saloons, and lost letters never reaching home. Yet, amid all the hardship, communities form. Churches are built, schools open, newspapers publish under names like Frontier Star or the Plains Gazette. In a tiny Colorado town, you see a woman teaching English to a class of Swedish immigrants while someone plows a frozen field in the background. Here's a detail easy to overlook. Ice. Shipped in giant blocks from northern lakes, stored in sawdust-packed ice houses and delivered to prairie homes like treasure. Before refrigerators, a single block of ice could change a meal or a mood. You ride a train now through the Rockies. It groans around cliffs, spits steam into the crisp air. In the dining car, a boy eats an orange for the first time. He chews slowly, eyes wide. His mother smiles as if she's watching a miracle, and everywhere you go, the country feels bigger than the people in it. The land expands faster than laws can keep up. Disputes arise over cattle trails, water rights, even shade trees. But gradually, counties get borders, states get stars, the West is woven into the rest. And yet, behind this enormous movement, there's a low hum, a kind of fatigue, a knowing that all this growth costs something, forests, languages, space to just be. Still, the journey doesn't stop, because the people don't. You step off the train, feet on new ground again. The frontier may be fading, but the desire to build, to settle, to shape something from wildness, that still burns, quietly, constantly, and the country walks on. You follow the path as it curves back toward the cities. The country has expanded, but now it begins to turn inward, to refine, to reckon, to organize itself in the image of what it has become. Factories hum, telegraph wires buzz. There's soot in the air now and ambition in the bricks. You arrive in the 1880s, and America has entered its industrial age. Steam powers the cities, iron frames climb into the sky. The streets are louder, faster, rougher. You walk through New York City, your boots clacking against cobblestones, slick with rain and coal dust. The skyline is no longer just church steeples, it's chimneys, cranes, and the skeletal beginnings of skyscrapers. But it's not just buildings rising, it's people. Immigrants pour through Ellis Island by the thousands, names misheard, languages colliding. You step into a tenement in the Lower East Side. The walls are thin, the air smells of soup and oil, and upstairs someone is singing in Yiddish. Entire families live in 2 rooms, sewing piecework by lamplight, hoping to buy a second chair or enough coal for the week. You head west again to Chicago. Stockyards stretch like cities of their own. Meat packers move with mechanical rhythm. You pass children selling newspapers on corners, their hands blackened with ink. There's energy here, but it's the kind that wears people down if they stop moving. In Pittsburgh, you hear steel scream against steel as molten metal pours into molds. The sky glows orange at night. Factories never sleep. And here's your quiet fact. In the 1890s, the average American worker clocked over 60 hours a week. No minimum wage, no paid time off. Yet out of that relentless labor, unions begin to whisper, then gather, then march. You attend a labor rally not as a protester, but as an observer, standing at the back of the crowd where the voices mingle with the wind. They don't yell, not here. They simply state what they want. Safer conditions, fair pay, dignity. The Gilded Age, they call this era. Glitter on the surface, but rust underneath. Magnates like Carnegie and Rockefeller build empires. Their homes sparkle with chandeliers, while just blocks away, children sleep 4 to a bed. But the country isn't just rich or poor, it's both, and everything in between. You step into a library funded by a philanthropist. Inside, a girl runs her fingers along the spines of books, some in English, others in Polish, Italian, or Chinese. Her parents can't read, but she will. It's one of those small revolutions that doesn't make headlines but changes everything. Women, too, are gathering now, not just for temperance or charity, but for voting rights. You walk beside a suffragist in a white dress, holding a placard that simply says, "I am a citizen." She doesn't shout, she stands. And out west, another quiet movement takes root: conservation. You follow a young man named John Muir into Yosemite Valley. He says things like, "Wilderness is necessity," and while his beard is wild, his thoughts are calm. National parks begin to take shape, slowly, deliberately. The country is growing, but it's also learning to pause. Historians still debate whether industrialization made America stronger or simply louder. But there's no denying its momentum. Trains stretch coast to coast, light bulbs flicker on, telephones ring. And beneath it all, the Civil War's long shadow lingers. You visit the South again, 30 years after surrender, and find fields worked by sharecroppers, schools still segregated, monuments rising to lost causes. The war is over, but the story is still being written, quietly, uneasily. Meanwhile, on the plains, the last free-roaming buffalo herds are gone. Indigenous resistance has been crushed. You visit a boarding school where children are taught to forget their language, their history, their names. The buildings are clean. The intent is not. And yet, amid all this, life continues. You sit on a porch in Kansas. A man plays a tune on a weathered banjo. His daughter dances barefoot in the grass, holding a rag doll with one button eye. The sun sets, the sky goes violet. The year might be 1898 or 1903 or something in between, but in that moment the country breathes, not in triumph, not in peace, just in motion. You stand up, dust off your coat, and look east. The century is about to turn, and the world is about to change. You walk into the new century just as the air begins to shift. It's 1900, and everything feels faster now, though not in a frantic way. More like a country stretching after a long, uneven sleep. Horses still clatter down cobbled streets, but now they compete with streetcars. Gaslights give way to electric bulbs. And in the city parks, the brass bands don't just play marches, they play ragtime. You find yourself in a neighborhood where 10 languages swirl on a single block. A Sicilian woman sweeps her stoop as her neighbor, a German baker, opens shop. The smells of cinnamon, garlic, and soapstone drift from open windows. Everyone seems to be both settling and striving, but the country's not just looking inward anymore. You hear new words in political speeches: empire, expansion, protectorate. The US has emerged from the Spanish-American War with overseas holdings: Puerto Rico, Guam, the Philippines. The map is wider now. America's ambitions reach beyond its borders, its flags planted in unfamiliar soil. Back home, new technologies arrive by the week. The Wright brothers fly at Kitty Hawk, barely, briefly, but enough. You stand in a field nearby and watch that strange machine lift like a hesitant bird, and the world quietly changes. Factories hum louder, assembly lines reshape everything from shoes to Model T cars. You walk beside a Detroit worker, wiping his brow between shifts. He's proud of the machine he helps build, even if he'll never afford one. Then in 1914, the world catches fire. You don't hear it immediately. Across the ocean, trenches begin to form. But here in America, life goes on until 1917, when the United States joins the Great War. You board a train packed with soldiers heading east. Their uniforms are stiff, their eyes uncertain. They pass farms, towns, cities, all shrinking in the distance behind them. Many won't return. Those who do come back, changed. In the meantime, The women stay. They run factories, manage homes, and organize drives. You step into a Red Cross hall where bandages are folded like flags, neatly, silently, with steady hands. And here's something often overlooked. The US military, newly modernized, still segregated. You follow a black regiment as it trains in harsh conditions, determined to serve a country that doesn't yet serve them equally. They fight anyway, honorably, bravely, quietly. Historians still argue whether America joined the war out of duty, strategy, or economic interest. But whatever the cause, the impact is lasting. When the armistice comes, it doesn't bring closure, just exhaustion. You walk through a small Midwestern town on Armistice Day. A parade rolls slowly down Main Street. There are cheers, but they're subdued. A boy holds a photograph instead of a flag. His older brother, maybe. Someone who didn't come back. And just when the country begins to breathe again, another wave hits. This time, not war, but illness. The 1918 flu pandemic sweeps silently through streets, schools, and homes. You walk past shuttered storefronts and houses marked with chalk. Neighbors speak through windows. The quiet isn't peaceful, it's anxious. You pass a nurse asleep in a chair, her mask slipping sideways, her hands still gloved. Yet still, life continues. The 1920s arrive like an exhale. You find yourself in a jazz club tucked inside a Harlem brownstone. The music is rich and alive. The room glows with laughter and clinking glasses. It's not just celebration, it's survival in motion. Women now vote. Their skirts are shorter, their voices louder. You follow a group of them to a polling place. They don't cheer, they nod, like they've been ready for this for years. But beneath the glitter, the fault lines remain. In Tulsa, 1921, you feel the tension snap. A thriving black neighborhood, Greenwood, burns. You smell the smoke, hear the quiet after the fire. No one plays jazz here for a while. And soon, the glitter itself begins to fade. You pass Wall Street in 1929. A man folds a newspaper with trembling hands. You glance at the headline. The stock market has crashed. It's quiet again, but this time the quiet feels heavy. Soup lines stretch around corners. A banker sells apples for a nickel. A child's shoes are patched with cardboard. The Great Depression doesn't arrive all at once. It seeps in, slow and relentless. You follow a family west in a beat-up truck, dust trailing behind them like a second shadow. In Oklahoma, the wind has taken the soil. In California, the signs read, "No jobs here, move on." And yet through it all, there's a stubborn kind of hope. People barter, share, plant backyard gardens. They tell stories at night, not just to pass the time, but to remind themselves they're still here. And the country, somehow, is too. The wind dies down, the soil settles, the long ache of the Depression still lingers, but the country begins to stir again, slowly, cautiously. You walk through a WPA project in the late 1930s, men shoveling gravel, painting murals, laying bricks. These aren't just jobs, they're lifelines. In a small-town post office, you watch an artist paint a sweeping scene of wheat and sun over the door. It's not just decoration, it's pride, planted where it's needed most. The New Deal changes the shape of daily life. Social security cards arrive in the mail. Electricity finds its way into farmhouses. You pass a Tennessee Valley dam under construction, water roaring, wires stretching like veins through the hills. Government grows, not as theory, but as roads, bridges, and meals. And then across the ocean again, the clouds darken. It's 1939. Europe is at war. America is not, at least not yet. But you can feel it approaching, like thunder still over the horizon. Factories begin to shift. Materials change hands. Men enlist. And then December 7th, 1941, you're in a living room when the radio interrupts a baseball score with news from Pearl Harbor. The air goes still. Coffee cools in cups, untouched. Suddenly, the country is in motion again, quick, determined, unified in a way it hasn't been since the revolution. This time, the stakes feel higher. This time, the enemy isn't abstract. It has names, maps, borders. You step onto a factory floor in Detroit. The machines are louder now, the workers faster. Women in overalls bolt down rivets, their hair tied up in scarves. It smells like oil, metal, and purpose. Rosie the Riveter isn't a myth. She's real, and she's on lunch break with grease on her hands. In the Pacific, you ride aboard a carrier. The air is tense but focused. Below deck, men write letters home. Some play cards. One hums quietly to himself, a tune he learned from a jukebox back in Kansas City. In Europe, the landscape is broken. You pass through Normandy, then Bastogne, then Berlin. The silence after combat is the loudest sound of all. A soldier reads a poem in the corner of a wrecked cathedral. Another just watches snow fall through a missing roof. Back home, ration books shape every meal. Victory gardens bloom in backyards. Children collect scrap metal in wagons. It's a war fought on many fronts, and the kitchen is one of them. And here's a detail that rarely makes it into textbooks. During the war, over 6 million women entered the workforce, not just in factories, but in offices, shipyards, laboratories. You meet one in a small Maine town, typing out aircraft maintenance reports with fingers that don't miss a key. When the war ends, she'll be told to go home, but she never quite forgets what she could do. Historians still argue whether the greatest generation was made by its circumstances or by its choices. Either way, they carried the weight of the century forward. In 1945, the war ends, not with a cheer, but with 2 explosions. You feel the heat from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, even at this distance. The world is different now, atomic, unblinking. The soldiers return, some to parades, some to quiet homes, some to silence. You sit beside one on a park bench. He feeds breadcrumbs to pigeons and says almost nothing, but his presence speaks volumes. And then peace, real peace. For the first time in decades, you drift into the 1950s on a breeze of optimism and neatly trimmed lawns. The economy booms, highways stretch like rivers, suburbs bloom like boxy flowers. You walk through one, rows of nearly identical houses, each with a driveway and a flagpole. Inside, a television glows in the living room. A mother calls her kids in for dinner. There's Jell-O on the table and a newspaper beside a radio that's still playing big band music. But under the surface, old questions rise again. In Montgomery, Alabama, you watch a quiet woman refuse to give up her bus seat. Her name is Rosa. The moment is small, contained within a single bus route, but it sparks something vast. You hear gospel hymns in southern churches. You see young men and women training in non-violence, knowing full well what violence might come. In one diner booth, you watch 4 students sit silently at a whites-only counter. They are not served, but they do not move. In the north, people march. In the south, they resist. In Washington, new laws form. Change arrives not as thunder, but as rain, steady, persistent, soaking everything in its path. And as the 1950s slip into the 60s, the mood shifts again. Quieter in some ways, louder in others. But the country, ever complex, ever moving, keeps walking forward, one careful step at a time. The 1960s arrive with tension in the air, like a string pulled too tight. You feel it on college campuses, in bus stations, around kitchen tables where the television glows with too much news for one dinner. The civil rights movement has gained momentum, and the streets are filling with voices, marching feet, chanted names, homemade signs held high under summer sun. You walk beside a crowd in Washington. August 1963. The voices are not angry, they're determined, steady. You find yourself near the base of the Lincoln Memorial when a preacher from Georgia steps up to the microphone. You already know what he's going to say. The dream, the mountain, the content of character. But here, in the moment, it feels softer. slower. Like a lullaby written for a tired country. And still, change resists. You travel south, where lunch counters close rather than serve, school doors shut. And yet, doors keep opening, one by one. Meanwhile, far away, another conflict brews. You follow a military advisor through dense, humid fields in Vietnam. The enemy is hard to see. The mission harder to define. What begins as an advisory effort deepens, first a few thousand troops, then more. By 1968, it's a quagmire. You watch protesters in Berkeley holding signs, their chants echoing off concrete. You hear silence in a soldier's letter home, stained with rain and regret. That same year, a motel balcony in Memphis becomes a moment frozen in time. Martin Luther King Jr. is shot. The nation holds its breath. Riots burn through cities. Hope doesn't die, but it dims.
And then moonlight.
You sit in a living room on July 20th, 1969, the volume turned low. On the screen, a grainy boot hovers above grey dust. That's one small step. It's quiet. Strangely quiet. Even in that moment of global attention, the room remains still. Just a few families watching the impossible become ordinary. Historians still debate whether the 1960s were an era of revolution or revelation. Did the country change, or did it reveal who it had always been underneath the slogans? Back on Earth, America enters the 1970s a little weary, a little cynical. The war drags on. You read headlines about Watergate. There's a chill in the air, not weather, but trust. You follow the resignation trail of a president, watching him board a helicopter that lifts slowly into a dull sky. But the country does not stop. It rarely does. You step into a factory where vinyl records spin, radios hum, and women operate massive switchboards with speed and silence. In another part of town, a child reads in a newly integrated classroom. Her voice falters at first, but she keeps reading. And here's a detail you may not know. In 1971, the first email is sent. It's clunky, almost accidental, but it marks the beginning of something that will one day shape the way you receive stories like this one. You walk into the late 70s under the flicker of fluorescent lights. Disco pulses from open windows, gas prices spike. The country feels uncertain again, but also alive with invention. Microchips, new medicine, longer hemlines, shorter attention spans. America is adapting. It always does. And yet there's something quieter happening in the background. Communities organizing around clean air, safe water, better schools. It's not always televised, not always dramatic. But the progress built in these small, steady spaces is what holds the whole together. You leave the city and head toward the plains again. Farms still dot the horizon, and while tractors are larger and silos taller, the rhythm hasn't changed much. A man leans on his porch rail. He doesn't say much, just watches the road as it disappears into the heat. And just like that, the 1980s rise over the horizon with neon and noise. But in this moment, the country rests. Briefly, you can feel the collective breath between decades, the inhale before the rush. The television is off. The radio is quiet. Someone is making tea. Another writes in a diary. The world keeps turning, but for now, America pauses. The pause ends with a buzz. The 1980s arrive not with a whisper, but with static, screen glow, and the thump of synthesizers. You step into a decade that feels louder, faster, more caffeinated. America's back on its feet, chest puffed, ready to run, even if it doesn't quite know where it's headed. You walk through a suburban neighborhood where the lawns are neatly mowed and the garages hum with boxy computers. Inside one home, a child is learning to type on a clunky keyboard while the television blares a cereal commercial. There's a microwave on the counter and a cordless phone as big as a shoebox. Everything beeps now. The Cold War hasn't ended. but it's shifting. You follow a diplomat into a sterile conference room in Geneva. Across the table, Soviet faces watch with matching caution. Outside, protesters in wool coats chant softly for peace. The fear of nuclear conflict still hangs like fog, but so does the hope for thaw. At home, the space race fades into something more grounded. Satellites, space shuttles, long-term orbits. You drift alongside a crew on the Challenger, their eyes wide with wonder as they float above a fragile blue Earth. And then, 1986, a disaster. A nation holds its breath again, this time watching the sky fall in real time. Back on the ground, politics grow bolder. Speeches boom from podiums promising prosperity, strength, and a return to greatness. The economy rebounds. Wall Street surges. You visit an office tower, all glass and chrome, where someone just made a deal that will echo through 5 time zones. It's a time of big hair, big money, big ambition. But walk a few blocks further, and you find different stories. In hospitals, doctors battle a growing health crisis with little support and growing fear. The AIDS epidemic spread silently at first, then loudly, then heartbreakingly. You sit beside a patient's bed where a friend reads aloud from a worn paperback. The room is quiet. The world outside not yet listening. In another part of the country, parents fight to keep their auto plants open. You pass shuttered factories with signs reading "for sale" in the windows. The boom doesn't reach everyone. Historians still argue whether the 1980s were a return to power or a redirection. Did America reassert itself or just rebrand its story? And in homes across the country, children grow up with Saturday morning cartoons, bike helmets, and blockbuster rentals. A boy rewinds a VHS tape. A girl learns to code in BASIC. They are inheriting a country built from contradictions and cartoons. You hear the Berlin Wall fall in 1989, not as a crash, but as a chorus, cheering, singing, chisels tapping against concrete. The Cold War doesn't end with an explosion. It dissolves brick by brick. You enter the 1990s through an airport terminal where someone just walked off a red-eye flight carrying a laptop the size of a suitcase. Fax machines still hum in back offices, but email is arriving, slowly, confusingly. The internet is coming, and with it a new way to see the world and yourself. You log into a dial-up modem and wait. And wait. And suddenly, you're connected. To 1,000 voices, a million screens, but the world still feels local. A war begins in the Middle East. Brief, brutal, broadcast live. You watch it on a grainy television, a green glow in a living room where popcorn is still passed around in silence. At home, the country debates identity, culture, privacy, technology. You sit in a college classroom where students argue about censorship and climate change, while Nirvana plays softly from someone's headphones. And here's your quiet tidbit. In 1994, a man named Jeff sells his first book online. A few years later, it won't just be books. The dot-com era begins like a murmur, then a surge. You end the decade walking through a bookstore, still standing, still sacred. A teenager flips through a history book, her fingers brushing pages you've already walked. She pauses at a photo. Maybe of Martin, or Armstrong, or the wall coming down. She lingers. Outside, someone calls her name. She tucks the book under her arm and leaves. The century is closing, and as the clock ticks toward midnight, you find yourself back on a quiet street. Porch lights blink. A breeze lifts through bare branches. Somewhere a radio plays a countdown. But here it's just stillness. The millennium turns, and the country exhales. The calendar flips to 2000, and with it comes a nervous breath. Will computers fail? Will planes fall from the sky? You stand beneath the glow of Times Square lights, watching the world not end. Y2K becomes a punchline, and the new century begins not with chaos but confetti. You walk into a world that feels cleaner, brighter, digitized. Cell phones shrink. Music lives in pockets. Emails replace letters. And instant becomes the new pace of everything. The internet no longer hums in the background, it pulses. In classrooms, students click instead of flip pages. In offices, monitors glow late into the night. But then a clear September morning arrives. You're in New York City when it happens. The sky is impossibly blue. And then smoke, sirens, silence. September 11, 2001. You don't hear it as much as you feel it. The shift, the rupture. You stand in the dust near Lower Manhattan, shoes coated in grey. People move without speaking. Eyes are red, not just from smoke, but from disbelief. And across the nation, televisions stay on for days, flags appear in windows, phones ring and ring and ring. After that, the world doesn't return to what it was. Airports change, policies change, a new war begins far away, but deeply felt. You ride in a Humvee across desert sand. You sit in a cafe with a soldier on leave, watching CNN scroll across the bottom of the screen. The war stretches into years, then decades. At home, people try to move forward. You visit a neighborhood in Ohio where a yellow ribbon flutters on a mailbox. Inside the house, a mother packs cookies into a box for her son overseas. She doesn't watch the news anymore. She just hopes he writes back. The 2000s aren't all war and worry. There's innovation too. Smartphones, social media, wireless everything. You visit a cafe where a teenager shows her grandmother how to FaceTime. The call connects. Faces light up, miles disappear. It's a small magic, used casually. But the country is changing in other ways too. You feel it in housing markets climbing too fast, in credit cards used for groceries, in whispered conversations about layoffs. Then, in 2008, the bottom drops. The Great Recession. You walk through a neighborhood of half-finished homes, their windows boarded up. A for sale sign creaks in the wind. No one's buying. You pass a bank with a line wrapped around the building. Inside, someone's asking where their money went. No one has a good answer. And yet, in that same year, you walk beside a line of voters stretching around the block. Some have never voted before. Some bring their children. You stand under a November sky when the results come in. The first black president. It doesn't erase history, but it bends it slightly. Historians still argue whether that moment marked a turning point or a delayed recognition of long-earned change. Either way, the country looked different that night. Not fixed, but possible. You enter the 2010s, surrounded by screens. Everything is searchable, streamable, shareable. You ride a subway where every passenger stares into a glowing rectangle. The world is right there, in your hand, and yet somehow harder to hold. You feel both connection and fatigue. Everyone is reachable, yet many feel unheard. Online spaces turn sharp, loud. You pass a comment section that feels more like a battlefield than a conversation. But outside those screens, life goes on. You visit a hospital where nurses comfort patients with the same quiet grace they always have. You walk through a school where kids still pass notes, even when they have phones. At a farmer's market, a man with grey hair teaches a teenager how to pick a ripe tomato. It's not content, it's just kindness. You follow protests in city streets about race, about climate, about rights. They rise not out of anger alone, but out of deep, persistent hope that things can still be made better. Signs wave, songs swell, silence follows. And here's your quirky fact. The emoji was officially added to the Oxford English Dictionary in 2013. The digital age now has its own language, part image, part shorthand, fully human. Toward the end of the decade, you start to notice something new. Anxiety beneath the surface. Climate reports grow darker, political lines harden, but people still gather. Still plant gardens, still light candles during storms. Then 2020 arrives, and nothing is the same. A virus moves through the world, silent and swift. Cities grow still, doors close, schools shutter. You walk through empty streets where only delivery trucks and birds pass by. In living rooms, people wave through windows, grandparents learn Zoom, teachers lecture to cameras that there is fear, loss, isolation, but also an astonishing tenderness. Neighbors leave food on doorsteps, children draw rainbows in sidewalk chalk, nurses hold phones to patients' ears when families can't be near. You attend a birthday party via screen. The cake is real, the hug isn't, but the love still is. And just when the silence feels too heavy, voices rise again. In parks, on streets, people gather, masked, unified, resilient. The country is tired, but still moving. Still asking what it means to care for each other, still reaching even through the screen. You step softly into the most recent stretch of time, one still unfolding, one whose dust hasn't quite settled. The pandemic's grip loosens, then tightens, then loosens again. You find yourself in a grocery store where shelves are half-stocked, and the clerk thanks every customer just a little more sincerely than usual. Behind her mask, there's a tired smile. Everyone's tired, but still kind. The world is different now. Offices are quieter, homes are fuller. A dining table now doubles as a classroom, a desk, a conference room. You pass a mother helping her child with a math problem while answering a work email with one hand and stirring soup with the other. The country has always adapted, but now it's doing it daily. And technology is no longer a tool, it's a lifeline. You attend weddings via screen, funerals too. A birthday party in Oregon includes relatives in Manila and Marseille, all sharing stories in soft voices, their screens flickering like windows across time zones. You're there too, watching, smiling, silent. Outside, change presses in. Climate events grow bolder, fires sweeping through forests, hurricanes hitting harder. You walk through a neighborhood picking up after a storm. A man repairs a roof with his son, not saying much. Next door, someone passes out bottled water. No one asks questions. They just help. Meanwhile, another kind of weather gathers, cultural, political, personal. Debates run hotter, headlines sharper. You scroll through a feed of voices, some fearful, some hopeful, many uncertain. The conversation is wide and constant, and yet it's hard to feel heard. And yet, quietly, in quieter places, something steady arises. You visit a community garden tucked between apartment buildings. Children water plants in mismatched boots. A grandmother kneels to show them how to gently pinch basil leaves. No one's filming it. No one's tagging it. It just happens. It always has. At a train station, two teenagers share earbuds and laugh over a song you've never heard. At a library, someone checks out a stack of books with their child. In a national park, a ranger tells a group of 8th graders about how trees talk to each other underground. The country is still arguing, still scrolling, still learning, but also still living and loving and walking forward, one small gesture at a time. Historians don't yet agree on what this moment will be called: the post-pandemic era, the age of acceleration, something else entirely. But as you walk through these still-forming chapters, you see what's always been true. History is not only made by speeches and wars and inventions, it's made by quiet mornings, shared meals, gentle resistance, repeated kindness. You return now in your mind to where we began. To the first steps of barefoot hunters crossing a forgotten trail. To a family in Cahokia tending their crops. To a crowded ship near Plymouth Rock. To a signature in Philadelphia. A protest in Selma. A vote in Chicago. A text message sent from a dorm room. A mask placed on a neighbor's doorstep. You stand beneath the full sky of American history, and it is not one story, it is millions, woven together, often out of sight. It doesn't move in a straight line. It pulses, it sways, it contradicts, it corrects, it remembers. And when you look at it this way, not as a test to study, but as a quilt stitched by countless hands, you see it clearly. Not perfect, but profoundly human. You sit down on a quiet bench, watching as the country moves past, some walking, some running, some resting, but all continuing. And in that moment you breathe deeply, not to analyze or explain or predict, just to appreciate how far the path has stretched and how gently it can continue. The road grows softer now, the lights dim, the sounds grow still. You've walked through centuries tonight, across fields and oceans, through smoky halls and crowded cities, beside people who built and bent and carried the weight of a nation that never stopped unfolding. And now, as the final threads of the story settle, so do you. The world beyond your window is quieter now. Maybe you hear a fan, a faint breeze, or just your own breath, rising, falling, steady. Let your shoulders sink. Let your hands rest. You've traveled far without ever leaving your room. There's no need to hold on to the names, the dates, the places. Let them drift. What stays is the feeling, that deep, gentle understanding that history isn't just about the loudest moments. It's about the quiet ones, the ones we live in every day, the ones you've felt tonight. A soft porch swing in the south, a snowy window in the north, a sunrise over a cornfield, a jazz tune in a city park, a letter sent, a meal shared, a choice made, softly, firmly, lovingly. These are the true steps of a country, and as your breath slows and your body softens and sleep begins to blur the edges of this journey, remember, you are part of it.
You are in the story.
And tonight, the story can rest. Good night.